An opulent new health campus will soon open its doors in Geneva, handsomely funded by investment bank Credit Suisse and housing the Global Fund, Gavi, Unitaid, Rollback Malaria, and Stop TB. In other words, it is public-private partnership, PPP, central. Why is the new global health hub located partway between WHO and Geneva's international airport needed? To answer this question, we must examine the venture philanthropy or Philanthro-capitalism model that now dominates global health, together with its greatest champion, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. When I was invited to this panel, I thought Philanthro-capitalism as a structural driver of health inequities was perhaps an overstatement. After all, it is global capitalism and its neoliberal phase, as we've just heard so brilliantly from Rama, that is in the driver's seat, with philanthropy only the sidecar. Yet it is the philanthro preceding capitalism that serves as the ideal accompanying obfuscatory and appropriating mechanism to enable capitalism to continue business as usual, or even more business than usual in the past. Applied to the global health realm, philanthrocapitalism is cloaked in and co-opts humanitarian and even social justice-oriented values and language, and hoodwinks us all. Hopefully, I will reverse this by the end of my talk. To begin, a few definitions and analytic tools. So, reminder from the Oxford English Dictionary, the desire to promote the welfare of others through generous donation of money to good causes, but not necessarily to love humans sincerely, equally, or to love them more than loving making money. And no excuse for ignorance or naivete around capitalism. John D. Rockefeller Jr. on Esso, Standard Oil, we're not in the business of producing oil, we're in the business of making money. Don't fool yourselves. And of course, moving to the corporate realm, publicly traded corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize benefits for and profits for their shareholders. So we cannot think about corporate social responsibility with any seriousness at all. It all enters into this profit-making guise. So what about philanthro-capitalism? Is it an oxymoron, or is this about bedfellows profiting? What's quite interesting is if you see the Economist's Washington reporters put together this book in 2008, How the Rich Can Save the World, if you see the subtitle. Now, this was just on the cusp of the global financial crisis. So by 2009, instead of how the rich can save the world, it is how giving can save the world, because it was very, very clear the rich were not going to be saving the world. Understanding health inequities from a critical political economy of health perspective entails recognizing, as the preponderance of global health actors fail to do, the crucial factors impeding health justice under the current global order. The role of power, access to resources, and social political relations. That is, the rules of the game that govern society. These current power configurations, including global financial and trade systems, discriminatory social structures and divisions nationally and internationally, the uneven distribution of wealth, of course, derive from long historical processes of accumulation and exploitation that accelerated under imperialism, capitalism, and now neoliberal globalization. So health and humanitarian work that does not address the political economy context on some level serves to legitimize the status quo, alleviating the responsibility of governments and excusing their mismanagement, nefarious ties with elite interests, and failure to avert danger from other powerful entities in the chain of political and societal determination of health. Corporate perpetrators of this exploitation of people and resources and their national counterparts who tolerate or encourage tax evasion, capital flight, deregulation, indebtedness, poverty and inequality, unfair trade rules, and so on, are thus precisely at the heart of this problem. And where does philanthro-capitalism fit into this story? The two U.S. tycoons turned mega-philanthropists have pivotally shaped the ideologies, institutions, and practices of international and global health. John D. Rockefeller in the first half of the 20th century and Bill Gates in the 21st. And I'll let you kind of subliminally read some of these slides to understand the origins of U.S. philanthropy. Let me just point out that philanthropy, even in the early 20th century, was staving off the welfare state. It was instead of the state, the big philanthropists were trying to reshape through scientific philanthropy what in many other countries in Latin America and Europe and so on were developing as social rights. So these two entrepreneurs and their powerful eponymous foundations share a belief in narrow, technology-centered biomedical approaches to health, overlooking social, political, and economic determination, and extending their colossal empires into education, agriculture, the natural sciences, and development. However, a critical difference divides them. The Rockefeller Foundation historically supported public health as a government responsibility, also favoring the creation of a single multilateral coordinating agency for global health, eventually WHO. Moreover, the public was healthily and analytically skeptical of philanthropy and struggled for collective social welfare measures. And here you see this skepticism played out in a 1901 cartoon. You have the capitalist who is stealing money from the laborer, who is literally greasing the wheels of philanthropy and donating a little bit to a hospital. And just in case you don't get the cynical nature of how the worker is robbed, the statue with the clarion is actually called Cynicus, and this is so-called Christian philanthropy. By contrast, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's privatizing philanthropy approach challenges the leadership and public purview of intergovernmental agencies, undermines WHO's constitutional mandate to promote health as a fundamental right, and allots a massive role to corporate and philanthropic partners who influence and profit from global health. Today, the public is unhealthily naive about Philanthro-capitalism. As the world's largest philanthropy, the Gates Foundation's 2016 endowment stood at over $40 billion, including $20 billion donated so far by U.S. mega investor Warren Buffett. Since charitable donations are tax-deductible, the U.S. public underwrites at least a third of this endowment with no say in its policies. The foundation spends more on global health than any government except the USA's, some years surpassing WHO's budget. And here I have this imaginary cartoon statements from the various actors. So former Director General of WHO happily welcoming Bill Gates. There he is sitting with almost a halo, a global health halo around his head. She's standing up talking. He's saying, yeah, but I hold the purse strings. Here she is saying, finally he's leaving. And of course, Bill Gates very much tied to the new Director General, Dr. Tedros of Ethiopia. The BMGF's power far exceeds its 10% of global health spending, exercised via a range of mechanisms. Not only does it convince other donors and national governments to follow its lead, most are actually quite eager to be seduced, many grants require counterparts to contribute a significant share of project costs. It also funds the data generation and statistical gymnastics to compile evidence for the global health field. And here you have Gates Foundation developed evidence regarding overseas development assistance. Moreover, since 2007, the H8, akin to the G8 or G7, is, in fact, it's about half Gates-influenced monies. The Gates Foundation is not alone. The Bloomberg philanthropies, with their array of noblesse oblige, royal we approaches, have also co-constructed a good news narrative, together with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, again extolling the royal we public health success of their generosity. And here we have influence over philanthropy. We've heard about Coca-Cola again and again. You look at the Guardian's coverage of development. You have Gates-founded approaches. And here you have Fundación FEMSA. I looked it up. Who are they? The largest public bottler of Coca-Cola products in the world, based in Latin America, where Coca-Cola or soft drink consumption is far greater than water consumption, given the problems of lack of clean water. So what about here in India? I look as a decidedly non-specialist outsider, but you all are familiar with the Companies Act of 2013, in which India became the world's first country to legally enshrine corporate philanthropy, or CSR, as mandatory for all companies with revenues above 10 billion rupees. And they have to designate 2% of profits to charitable causes, with only the bare minimum of rules. So pharma corporations cannot invest in pharma and so on. Now, I was in Matanchari over the weekend, and I stumbled on this extraordinary graffiti, and we could spend the rest of my time just analyzing this. Tata kills, Tata funds, of course, nearby tea plantations and so on. Tata kills higher, Tata funds much lower rank here, and so on. Back to the global scene, the Gates Foundation offers a case in point of how venture philanthropy feeds the continuity of the global capitalist order. It appeared on the scene precisely at the apex of neoliberalism, a moment when overall spending for global health was stagnant, suspicion of development assistance at an all-time high, and many low and middle-income countries floundering under the multiple burdens of HIV, re-emerging infectious diseases, violence, and soaring chronic ailments, compounded by decades of international financial institution conditionalities and social expenditure cuts. Today, virtually all key global health actors have received Gates funding, and many, many NGOs, CSOs, and so on. Emblematic of elite interests in contemporary society, the Gates Foundation disregards the underlying causes of ill health, overlooks what role the enormous accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few has played therein, and stakes a moral high ground regarding its generosity and narrow, technically oriented savoir-faire, all the while remaining under-scrutinized by scientists and unaccountable to the wider public. The Gates Foundation, and also its giving pledge, has largely uncritically been hailed as a savior of global health. But this assessment excludes the question of what could be achieved through combined social, political, and public health measures, such as investing in improved living and working conditions, ensuring food sovereignty, building redistributive welfare states, or even abolishing the military, as Costa Rica has done. To be sure, this is not simply a global health issue, but a profound problem of the marked asymmetry of power in the global order. And here, again, we see the 8 prime levers of the global order. This is from last year's Oxfam annual inequality zinger. These 8 wealthiest men own the same as half of humanity. 6 of them are American capitalists: Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Ellison, Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and then Carlos Slim of Mexico privatized telecom across Latin America, and Amancio Ortega, the Spanish owner of the Zara fashion enterprise. So all of them are involved in global health at some level. And one might imagine just doing away with their corporate fortunes and redistributing that would actually solve global health inequities in an instant. They haven't taken my advice. Again, back to the Indian context. I want to focus on philanthropy masquerading as liberating primary health care. Here we have the MoTech project that's funded by the Gates Foundation, and initially in Ghana, now in an mHealth project in Bihar. And this is according to Marine Aldada's work that has shown that this mobile phone primary health care technology, rather than being liberating and political as it's painted, is instrumental and individualistic. It only disseminates, doesn't offer any kind of interaction, no dialogue between the health system and users, and the empowerment that is supposedly offered is actually one of continued unequal power relations and domination that offers that claims to compensate gender inequalities, but sends unquestionable, centralized, automated, top-down approaches, and so has a very minimal effect on improving health for women in the long term. Now, conflicts of interest pervade the Gates Foundation and many other philanthro-capitalists. It has been criticized for investing in polluting industries, unhealthy food and beverage TNCs that are beneficiaries of its own health and agricultural initiatives in Africa, Asia, and elsewhere. Despite touting health equity, the Gates Foundation's significant financial interests in big pharma, lately through Buffett's holdings rather than directly, tacitly privilege corporate profiteering over access to affordable medicines. To boot, the Gates Foundation's global health leaders have hailed from big pharma and big biotech. Current President Mundell was previously at Novartis, his predecessor from GSK, and the CEO previously headed product development at Genentech, creating gene-targeted cancer therapies. As you know, concerns around coziness with big pharma led India to sever financial ties between its National Immunization Advisory Body and the Gates Foundation in early 2017, and this follows on the heels of Gates himself lobbying the health ministry to introduce Merck's rotavirus vaccine and the BMGF funding via its largest global health grantee path of ethically dubious studies of Merck's and GSK's HPV vaccines among girls of low-income backgrounds in India. Perhaps the greatest conflict of interest involves public sector reliance on the Gates Foundation as a main financier of WHO. It would take just $2.2 billion, half the budget of a single hospital in New York City, to fully fund WHO through member state dues. Instead of resolving its longstanding underfunding crisis, WHO's 2016 reform, FENSA, the Framework of Engagement with Non-State Actors, only further legitimized the Gates Foundation and corporate influence by allowing these actors to apply for official relations status originally meant for public interest NGOs that share WHO's primary goals. But it's through PPPs that the Gates Foundation has exerted its greatest power. PPPs have proliferated since the 1990s as a way of funding and implementing global health initiatives in line with neoliberal prescriptions for resolving health problems, typically segmenting markets to ensure market share while exacerbating health inequities. Most major PPPs were launched by the Gates Foundation or have received funding from it. Gavi, for instance, promotes new second-order vaccines instead of ensuring universal vaccination using existing effective vaccines, and for underwriting already hugely profit pharmaceutical corporations in the name of saving children's lives. The Global Fund, the largest PPP, offers business opportunities, lucrative contracts, and decision-making leverage as a prime feature of its work. Sidelining UN agencies, it funds vertical AIDS, TB, and malaria countries in 140 countries, further debilitating health systems, WHO, and any semblance of democratic global health governance. Neither WHO nor UNAIDS have voting rights on its board, nor do most countries, but the private sector, currently represented by Merck and the Gates Foundation, does. So PPPs allow private interests to frame the public health agenda, justify corporate involvement in the public domain, conflate private and collective objectives, and raise multiple conflicts of interest. Most PPPs channel public money into the private sector, not the other way around. The tenet that business models can resolve social problems and are superior to anti-oppressive, redistributive, collectively deliberated policies developed by democratically elected governments rests on the belief that the market is best suited to these tasks, despite evidence to the contrary. And today, even the Rockefeller Foundation behaves just like the Gates Foundation, abandoning its prior support for the public in public health and endorsing impact investing, so addressing social or environmental problems while also turning a profit. Whether in my city, Toronto's current minus 30 degrees or Trivandrum's plus 30 degrees, we cannot pull the wool over our eyes. Being duped by the rhetoric of philanthropy's generosity rests on certain religiously embedded notions, and we've just heard about the health perils of religious fundamentalism from Siva. The Protestant ethic underpinning the Anglo-Saxon cradle of philanthropy and cradle of capitalism is most vividly expressed in a New Testament passage, quote unquote, From those who have been given much, much will be required, and from those entrusted with much, even more will be expected. And herein rests the problem. Philanthropists have not been given, rather they or their ancestors have taken or plundered. It is time that we eschew such biblical notions of generosity and decry not only the origins of philanthropy, but, as I have argued today, the ways in which Philanthro-capitalism is ever more deeply embedding the rapacious order and its health inequity consequences, not attenuating these. In the end, Philanthro-capitalism is decidedly not a Robin Hood endeavor. Instead, its hidden mantra goes thus: to those who profit much, much must be done to justify their riches and ensure that the enrichment machine continues. In sum, it is time for governments, UN agencies, and their member states to act in a truly moral and politically responsible fashion, pressured by citizens, health activists, and academics, to overturn Philanthro-capitalism's hold on global health, reject plutocracy, and reclaim democratic, anti-oppressive, accountable, publicly funded global health decision-making for equity. Nandi.